Then, to repeat what Christine just said, we are somehow like friends, but I used to do what you are doing now. Then you know more than me. You interrupt me. You maybe not too often, but if I'm wrong, you say, look, I disagree. Hopefully it won't be the case. And we make it as interactive as we could. On just to give you a bit of background on what we'll be trying to do. With this first presentation earlier on today, we saw more like kind of top-down approach. You see, we spoke about billions, trillions of whatever. Now the question is, how do we make it happen? So how could we make sure that all projects get access to this very interesting source of funding so that we could make our renewable energy project feasible? Then we will have a session this morning whereby we will try to define an approach so that we could categorize every renewable energy project so that when you are confronted to an application, you know how to treat it, which category I am in, how do I approach it. And then you will see later this afternoon, we'll go through all the risks and see how we could mitigate it as a financier. And then tomorrow, we'll move to something a little bit more technical, getting into the nitty-gritty of financial modeling. Again, providing you with a real tool to assess your projects, and so that maybe, hopefully, by the end of this week, you could have ways of answering your questions and assessing project requests as they may come on your desk next week. Then let's start. Then this morning, we will be speaking about the key challenges which make a renewable energy project different from the others. And you will see that it sounds a bit obvious, but there are a few technical features that make renewable energy project different from other infrastructure projects. But these differences also translate in a different approach in terms of financing. Then we start very kind of easy, very factual, and then we'll move, you will see, to something a bit more advanced with, at the end, a table, which is, in all fairness, the one we use at EBRD for assessing projects. Then, on possibly what I should have explained, that in my past at the bank, then I worked in the power energy team, but also in the credit department. Hence, the approach that you will be seeing, which is the effective one used at EBRD. I'm seeing our friend from the IFC, but in fact, it's a jointly approach that we shared with IFC on many projects. Then now, we'll see what makes energy project, renewable energy project specific. Then we will share a way of assessing or categorizing projects, and what it means for us will be our last slide, and this will be the conclusion of this morning's session. Now, what we would like to answer, the kind of questions we have for today now, in this morning, it's what again make energy, renewable energy project different from infrastructure or other clean energy project. What are the challenges? And these challenges will convert into a specific methodology in how we could assess these projects. You might recall from our presentation, was it a month ago, where we have had this pre-seminar session. We have one issue somehow with renewable energy. It's the fact that their production is intermittent and largely uncertain. And by the way, reflecting on the James presentation from this morning, you will see that whilst we have a demand and a supply, our big problem with renewables that our supply is somehow not that consistent with the demand, and in particular the way the demand is building in. I remember, was it Harold that spoke about data centers? It's true that the demand of energy from a data center is flat. Also, solar panels, it's not a production which is flat. It's very good during daytime. It's not that good overnight. Hence, the challenges which arise from an intermittent production. Now, the second challenge for us is that we are selling on a market which is regulated. It's not like a product that you could sell into a market and then somebody come and take it. No, we have a regulation, and this will have an impact on the way we do produce, and we are constrained in our production. Now, very important, and we will see that in the next slide, there is a subtle difference between certain technology or among certain technology. Certain technologies, as we will see, are very much intermittent and uncertain, and subject to a regulated market. Others are not. Hence the need to differentiate all this technology. All of them are renewable energy, but we will only apply the methodology I will describe now to a few of them. Then I'm Doug Vader now. Apparently, oh yes, I like that one. Then we will have energy efficiency. And then if we think at our two constraints, intermittence and regulated market, energy efficiency is clearly not intermittent. It's somebody enhancing or improving the way they consume energy. And obviously, you do that throughout the time. There is no intermittence in the way you save energy. Again, it's not regulated because usually you save your own energy. Then it's not an issue of market. Hence, so that we are clear for the presentation during the week, energy efficiency is not covered in the methodologies that we will describe. Biomass, and here we will possibly, Mustafa, if you would like to explain, because you have a very interesting visit that will come on Thursday. Again, we don't have this question of uncertainty. Why is that? Because biomass, very often, you disconnect the production of the gas, let's say, to the production of electricity. Then you have this very interesting ability to produce when energy is needed. Again, here, our methodology won't apply. And if you think at the market, sometimes you could even sell heat, then it's a complete different market. Or you could even sell hydrogen. Then again, it's not electricity market. Then again, we will put that inside, outside our scope for today. On geothermal, it's not yet a very, I would say, structured approach today, but again, you are not supposed to, or largely exposed to intermittence, except when you have some big earthquake or whatever, and then suddenly you lose your production. But you are expecting a very stable production from geothermal, and although you are selling to the electricity market. Now we will, in fact, concentrate today on PV solar, on wind, and also on small hydro. With, you might recall this question I asked about large hydro, because these days, although renewable, they could also be considered as storage. And I don't know if you are familiar with this concept of spinning reserve, which is this capacity you need to stabilize a network. And again, large hydro has this benefit of offering you additional services beyond the production of electricity. Then in summary, we have a lot of renewable energy technology, but we will be concentrating on the three underneath here. Why is that? It's because the three are subject to intermittence and market regulation. Now, how do we address intermittence? You might have, again, we discussed it, but we will come back now quickly on this concept. We have this approach of PXX, which is a way of assessing the likely production of your power plant based on some engineering or analysis of your likely production. I don't know if any of you have already financed or being exposed to renewable energy project on this concept of P50, P75. You are all familiar with it, or maybe not? Then we will get back into more details, and so that you could grasp what is the concept. What we're trying to do with the PXX, it's in fact to be in a position to predict, but we will be trying to then predict the amount of energy that we're likely to produce in the future. And to do that, engineers then will come, assess the wind, putting mast, maybe for 2 years, 1 year, and assess the wind, not only its speed, but also its quality. Then bear in mind that if this is a very humid country, the wind is much stronger because then it pushes much more the windmill than in a dry condition. I remember walking in Morocco, there was another issue, which was a sound, which again raised a lot of the mast on the infrastructures. And again, depending on the condition, on the quality of the wind, you will assess how much energy you are likely to produce in P50, 50% of the time. P75, it's 75% of the time you produce at least that amount of energy. On P90 will be 90% of the time you produce at least that amount of energy. And then, as you could imagine, it's critical for us when we are financing the project to know in which scenario we are on how much energy we are likely to produce. Then, what are we trying to do here? It's then really to assess the probability of our project producing energy. Why is it important? It's because it will help us modelize our production, and then, as you will see tomorrow, we'll build a financial model that will help us design the project or reproduce the way the project is performing, and then telling us how much energy and then how much money we will be generating. And then, how are they calculated? Then these are, as I said, engineers that are coming. Sometimes for wind, as I said, they put a mast. And then when you have a mast for 1 year, obviously it's not enough. Then you make an extrapolation with a place like an airfield, which is not too far away. Then you measure what happened on the airfield, which is, let's say, 5 kilometers away, and you compare so that you could backtrack, let's say, 20 years, and then you have good set of data. You do the same for water, and again, trying to have some hydrological information on how much water was running into a riverbed, and the same for solar. Although for solar we are helped a lot because of the satellite and because of the fact, as you will see, that there is far less discrepancy within the data for solar than there is for wind and for water. And then we will, as I said, tomorrow, use these scenarios and directly feed the scenario into a financial model so that we could build our forecast. Another thing which is very important, and sorry for being a bit nerdy on the way I present it, but we will have to come back to that tomorrow. Depending on the technology, the volatility, I will explain to you what it means, is very, very different. Basically, volatility is a reference to the fact that or the difference between the P50, 50% of the time you produce at least an amount, and the P90 is low or high. And as you could anticipate, if you have a big difference between the two, it will completely change the way our financial model is reacting on the amount of money we are generating or not. And I will show you in the next slide how we approach it. Then for solar, basically the idea is that even if you got this year a lot of rain or a bit less rain, there isn't a big difference in the way you will be producing energy 1 year or the other. And the reason is that these solar panels these days still generate electricity even if you got some clouds. Then not a big difference, volatility is very low. Onshore wind is quite high, and don't ask me why, but from 1 year to the other, you could have a quite a big difference in the way you were producing energy, because that year the weather wasn't too good, and then as a consequence you got a lot of wind. Or in the contrary, we have in all the continents these days anticyclonic situation during like 2 months, and then there is no wind during all the summer times, and it could be a big of a difference. People notice that for offshore it's much more stable, and again it will help us a lot when we structure our financing. And these days the worst is clearly what we call run of the river, which are the small hydro with no storage, where from one year to the other you have huge differences in the way you produce your energy, because this year was very dry. I remember financing project in Bosnia-Herzegovina like mini hydros, and same I guess in Croatia. You go from 1 year droughts to 1 year excess production. When you have a dam it's great, but when you have run of the river, it's a disaster, because you could have like no production during a year. In particular, because for run of the river, you have a mandatory obligation to release part of the water for the fish and for whoever is downstream. You will be producing electricity, and therefore it's totally impossible to produce or to sell on this type of market. Onshore wind, at a minimum, yes, but you can't guarantee that you will be producing even for the next hour a certain amount. Hence, the problem is that if usually this market will be based on the hourly basis, then you will have to tell the dispatch people, look, in 1 hour I'm producing that much. On wind you can't. Then you could say at a minimum I might be at 50% capacity, but you can't go beyond. Hence, a real problem for you to compete here. The same apply here. As we said, the difference between the two is that who choose the producer. This one, the market operator choose it. Here, it's the end users that choose it, but no difference. And now, when we spoke about the type of market, we have to touch on the type of legal agreement that will underpin your ability to sell to this market. And usually the terminology we use is power purchase agreement, on whatever legal obligation goes with it. But it's obviously a very important, I would say, terminology to know about, because you will hear again and again about it. This PPA will have, however, to be very clear on the consequences of intermittent production, so that whoever buys the energy knows about it. Very important that it clarifies whether you are required or not to have backups. And you will see that more and more regulators ask renewable energy producers to also come with batteries. Hence, the fact to really be careful, even at the earlier stage, when you have a tender process organized by a country, whether it comes with only the production or production plus storage. Hence, the need to check if it's a need for backup or not. How the network is loaded at the injection point, and we'll see the curtailment. And finally, we will come back, I think, this afternoon, to this business of demand. So to which extent you, as a producer, will be exposed to a demand pattern whereby, yes, you produce, but there is no demand. What do you do with your electricity? Then we will go into more detail in all this type of concept. Then, what type of legal agreements or approach you will have towards the market? Here we will have two parts. We have one part about the legal structure, one part about the way you are paid, because the two are different concepts. And imagine that you have a power purchase agreement, and now we'll see what type of approach you could have towards the offtake agreement between you and the offtaker. So then we first speak about the legal, and then about the finance, on the way you are paid for. Then here are the various markets which are usual for a power plant. Then you will have take or pay. We will explain what it is. Take and pay is or and. net metering, merchant, capacity payment. And then on the top of it, you will have markets associated to the clean development mechanism or any kind of green brownies that you could have when you sell green energy. Because it's a different market, obviously, then you will have money coming from electricity being sold to the off-taker, but also green energy being sold to the same person but generating additional revenues. It's a different market that goes on the top of the others. Then what are these markets and how do they work? In a take or pay, ideal for us in case of renewable, and this is what you will be looking for, when you produce, the off-taker has the obligation to buy. And this is great because then you completely, I would say, discount the consequences of being intermittent. Because even if you produce in the morning where nobody wants the energy, doesn't matter, you produce, the person in front of you has to pay. Now, obviously, with time passing on the amount of renewable energy injected into the network getting a little bit sensitive, I would say, owing to the ability of the network to absorb the energy, more and more you will switch to a take on pay. Big difference, because here it's only when the energy is needed that you get paid for. Then it's not ideal for you as a renewable energy producer, in particular if you are unable to predict the amount of energy that you will be producing at a given time. Net metering, I mention it, although it's a different type of project, usually it's smaller. This will be about you producing but also consuming. Then many regulations these days to incentivize SMEs to build their own solar power plant onto their roof, or even residential customers to build their own capacity, then to really go down the scale in terms of size, I've introduced this concept of net metering, whereby you calculate the amount of energy you consume by netting it off by the amount of energy that you export to the grid. And then you net it off. But you will see later that the big question is at which price each of this energy flow goes. And in many instances, the price is not the same. And when it's the same, then the distribution company won't be happy at all. And we will see that later. But net metering is a very common scheme, in particular for smaller capacity. Merchant, then it's totally open, it's Wild West, and then you get the energy sold on the spot market at the price which has been agreed. Capacity payment will come very often for hydro, because a network regulator needs a certain capacity, what we call the spinning reserve, to guarantee the frequency and to avoid the consequences of any outages. Therefore, they could have this capacity on standby, but this is mostly for large hydro. And then come this business of green certificates or whatever additional money you might be receiving when producing green energy. What are the price, or what is the price that goes with this contract? Because again, in summary, we have the legal agreement that underpin the relationship between you, producer, and your off-taker. And then we discuss take or pay, take on pay, and the others. But then comes the question, what is the price? Because it's very important to know at which price you will be, given when you sell your electricity. The one you prefer, and I think James and Cecilia mentioned it, is feed-in tariff. Feed-in tariff is like the I would say the old approach to renewable or any kind of IPP model, whereby you are given a definitive price for the electricity that you will be producing. However, and this is our big problem, is that feed-in tariff is normally very close or closely associated to the capex on the cost of your power plant. Then, as you could imagine, 15 years ago, PV panels were very expensive. then you will be expecting a very high feed-in tariff in order to be able to produce. Otherwise, you won't do the project. The problem is that when technology improves, and people realize, how could I pay that much for an electricity which is now half the price? Then we will see that feed-in tariff must be still compared with other parameters of the network to whom or to which you are selling in order to assess your risk. Because it's very good for you, but could be risky in an environment where you foresee big changes in the price of electricity to be sold. CFD, which is contract for difference, is almost the same at the end of the day when you think at it. It's only that the party who is offsetting the difference is not the same. In a feed-in tariff, usually you will be paid by one entity, which is the one with whom you are under contract. In a contract for difference, you will have two entities. Normally, you will have one which guarantee you or pay you for the price which directly results from the market, and then the difference will be compensated. Question is by whom and when? And then you have to make another research to check who is paying and if this entity could afford such a difference. Net metering, and this is where it starts getting a little bit tricky and quite interesting. Because what will happen is that you will be receiving or buying electricity from the network, from the distribution company. And now, I think Christine taught me about question on interactive sessions. So would you have an idea on how much losses we will be having on a distribution company? Then imagine distribution company, you receive electricity from the transmission company and you distribute it to end user customer. Then roughly speaking, first question, what type of losses you are familiar with? Normally we say two of them. There is two categories.
So we usually talk about technical losses. So
yeah.
Those are the losses from the
the
grid.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the commercial losses.
Exactly. So and because the gentleman is partially IFC, is very politically correct, commercial losses are theft. Then it's a bit less, not as nice to present it that way. And then comes the question, what is the rough percentage of energy that is lost in one or the other in a distribution network? The first one is purely technical and doesn't really change much among the providers. Or let's start. Who believes that it's 5% of energy lost? Roughly speaking, I help you, it's around 10%. It could be slightly less. Then a distribution company by 100, it could only distribute 90. Big problem. And now, depending on the countries, on the payment discipline, what could be commercial losses? 50%. I remember when I started, long time ago, in Albania, we were reaching 50%. In fact, it was almost embarrassing to pay for electricity because, people were singling out you. Oh, why are you paying? Because when the payment discipline is lost, it's lost for everybody. So if you manage to keep it below 5, you are good. And the closest to 1 or 2, it's better. But it could be anything, minimum would be 1 or 2. But now let's go back to 100. You supply 100, you already lost 12. Then when you come to net metering, what will happen? Your distribution company purchase electricity for 100, but they only distribute 92 or 82, 88, sorry. Then at the end of the day, if you offer to produce at the same price as the one they sold you, they will say, no way, because I already make a loss on this energy. Then as you could imagine, in a net metering scheme, in order to be effective, you need a different price. And you won't believe that most of the regulators don't take that into account because of the social approach to it. Then politicians will say, look, I would like to deploy small PV for all customers. You will see it's great. You net off your consumption by your production. But distribution company will say no. And how will say no? By refusing to connect. No, you know what? I'm happy to do it, but I don't want to change the substation. And then you are dead. Hence, the big issues that you have with net metering and this kind of dispatch production approach, because it has to be carefully thought out in order to be effective. Capacity payment, mainly for large hydro, because then you pay for an amount of megawatts that you could link to the network in order to maintain a certain stability. Then you are all familiar with this issue of frequency, or maybe not, maybe yes, just in case. Then the amount of energy that you send to your network is then the voltage, the intensity, multiplied by 2, it gives you watts, energy. But there is a bit of a trick here, because in fact the frequency also matters. And basically, when you have more demand than supply, what will happen on your network is that your frequency will go down. Then from 50 Hertz in Europe, 60 maybe in certain of your country, you will get to 49, 48. And then if you end up at 48-ish, all your suppliers will stop producing. The reason is that the generators become motors. Then, in fact, you break down your equipment. And even you, on the other side, for certain equipment, if you haven't 50 Hertz, normally you better shut down the equipment. Then the big issue that you will have is that if you don't maintain your capacity or your frequency, you end up having the whole network being shut down. And the need of having capacity connected so that you could maintain your frequency.
Yeah, we saw also on the feed-in tariff, we saw also cases where the purchaser also has the right to revise the prices on certain conditions. I mean, for example, in India, they have in the contract the right when the difference when the technology price is evolving, they can revise the contract. It's happened also in France. It was a very big case. Yeah.
And then we are under huge risk, but as James was explaining, now it's more and more the case, because I guess regulators can't accept to have people enjoying preferred conditions which are okay today, but 5 years down the road, people find it outrageous, and they say, how could I accept it? However, your financing was raised up front. Then it's a bit of a dilemma. But you're right, Mustafa. Except, I don't know what is the solution to it, except accepting to reschedule your debt. And we will see there is at least one trick in the financing structure, which is what we call the tail. Then the tail in a PPA is the amount of time you are left with after you finish to repay your debt. And we will see in the table which is coming, not this one, but the next one, that we need a substantial amount of time being kept aside so that you could address what Mustafa was referring to. Yeah. Then now, contracting on retail. Then, as we said, we have also in the offtake agreement to take account of the electricity purchase, the settlement mechanism, the compensation for renewable on premiums, and we have also to take account of who is buying. Is it a state-owned company? Is that a corporate, or is that a market? Then, in the risk session that we will have tomorrow, we will look at all these different cases, and it will help us structure our approach towards the financing of this project. Now come the type of, I would say, approaches that has been defined by IFIs in the way they look at each project and they try to categorize each of them. So this type of approach is usually built among bankers and banking department, credit department, and ESG or whoever also has a stake in the decision a bank is taking to invest. And we will then define categories, and you will see that this category directly fitting in a table that we will have, whereby we have a certain P90, 75 on technology, on DSCR. So the first category will be this contract where you have no subsidy, a feed-in tariff, and you have an indirect or implicit sovereign support. Basically, you are selling to the national utility, still state-owned, it's doing well, then there is no reason to believe that you won't get paid for your power plant. The next one is, and this is getting a bit more tricky, is where you have an implicit subsidy in the way the tariff is structured. And here, not to say that you are really at risk, but take a feed-in tariff like you have had initially, was it a long time ago, maybe not that like 10 years ago, where a government was saying, look, I will provide you with a subsidy in case you are selling solar energy. Then it's great because it's a government, but government always change their mind. Then you are at risk. And therefore, you have to consider it when you assess your project. Now, you will come to PPAs with a private entity, which is not like a market or not a national utility, but you are using the network to sell to a corporate, or it could be what we call a plant in the funds. In the funds means that you have a power plant which is associated to a business or corporate, and then you have to look at the corporate ability to buy your electricity. But we'll make a difference between this project where you have a second way out. Basically, you could take a cable and get to the network and sell your electricity. Or if you are clearly on this project D, tied to an off-taker, in which case, if the off-taker fail, you fail, which is not a good news. And then we have category E, which is this merchant price, where you are at full risk and you have then to assess your ability to sell your electricity at a given price. And then we have different type of PPA without a floor price or not. We need then, in a kind of conclusion, to reconcile the exposure to the market, exposure to the technology, on the unpredictability of the production, and then to design a matrix where, in a kind of systematic way, we will see what risk we could take for each technology in a given market environment. Then that table, and we will come back this afternoon to the very same table, adding some rows and some consideration, will give you, for each technology, the type of approach you will be likely to take in terms of P75 or 90 on the DSCR that you will expect this power plant or power project to generate. And the idea here is really to move from a broad concept of renewable energy to something very practical. On the table I'm showing you is the one I was using as a credit officer. Onshore wind, P75 could be the option. The thing is that if you have P90, less project will be financeable as a consequence, because in your scenarios, you don't have enough energy to afford your loan. Then, the kind of, if you don't have it in any of your banks, you are familiar with, I don't know, internally, you are familiar with this type of approach yet, or is that something that you will bring back home and consider it? I don't know if you already developed such approach within your respective structure. If you haven't yet done it, my recommendation will be and we'll provide you with the slides, obviously, but to really consider it as an approach that could be shared, as I said, within your department, banking, but it could be treasury, it could be credit, and then what it allows you to do. And when we will go to the model tomorrow, you will see that it then provides you for a kind of systematic approach. Then you are not assessing project like in a random way. No, you have a technology, which one? You have a type of market, which one? Then this is my scenario. And doing that with the model that we will share with you tomorrow, you will see whether your project is financeable or not.
Yeah, so are there any questions from the audience or also experience to share?
It's actually not a question. It's not like, but I can speak for what I've seen in IFC. So in IFC we have industry specialists in Washington, and they actually share technical guidance on the levels of PX and DSCRs for projects. But what I can add is that we see that in some markets, sometimes those guidelines can evolve depending on the maturity of the market and the competitive landscape. I think if I'm not wrong, I've seen that, for example, in South Africa, there were a lot of projects in wind where banks, even commercial banks, were pretty aggressive in terms of PX to use and DSCR levels to use, and but it's but the trend and another point also is with a large portfolio of projects, we sometimes can do like an analysis of the portfolio and see if those guidelines can evolve and be adjusted based on the real life performance of portfolio projects.
Then half of the project were done with AFD, another half with IFC, another one. Then we all got it, and the pressure to supporting Egypt was very high, and then we went down both in terms of PXX, in DSCR, but also in maturity. I remember, because I was the one who approved at EBRD, the last one, we were 25 years. I mean, for technology goes back to the feed-in tariff, which wasn't yet that mature, whatever we say. On second, in terms of portfolio, it's very true, and it works two ways. It works one way, because we will see in the way, again, this afternoon, we structure project. It's very useful to have that table in order to monitor your portfolio and your exposure to a given technology or a given type of market. And then either you're happy because you could have some lessons learned from a country or technology, or you might find yourself a bit too exposed to a given technology in a given country. In particular, its regulation is a bit unstable, and then you know what will happen. The decision will be, I stop feed-in tariff in that technology in that country. Now, unfortunately, if you're exposed mainly to these conditions, you will be in trouble. But it's very true, and it's a tool which is very useful for monitoring the portfolio.
I was just wondering, to come back to my earlier question on solar, that, for example, now we're seeing in category A and B, that for solar, you would structure on P75 and above, whereas for wind, you'll be doing that on P90 and above. Whereas especially nowadays, what we are seeing is that solar is, well, being quite heavily hit by those negative price blocks and therefore running substantially more risk. So how would you address that in this table?
No, you're right. I mean, at that stage, we won't have seen it. We will see that this afternoon when we speak about competitiveness. But you agree with me that here, if we only speak about production on, I would say, likely terms of the offtake, with solar, we're good. Now, the big question is that as long as somebody is buying and is not almost penalizing you for producing, as we see. But in the PPA, it can't be more than true that these days, more and more off-taker will tell you, you provide the batteries, I don't guarantee you the full offtake, and they will even penalize you if you supply me, because then my injection point will burn out, which is almost what happened in Spain and in Portugal. No, it's very true. And that's a huge risk these days.
No, thank you. I think you showed one of the slides, the integrated model, where utility does everything. I just wanted to just ask about successes of that model globally. I think we have a South African experience which is not so good, and what should utilities look out for, the sort of pitfalls when they're going for that model, and are utilities still going for that model? Thanks.
In fact, it's a question that we discussed together with colleagues in Zambia. So the market is not too far because it's even interconnected to yours. And it was like 2 years ago with ESCO on the colleagues. And ironically, the approach, then it's a question of finding an offtake, and then everything will have been on the players of the Copper Belt region. Then when you have a big private offtaker, and then you first design a model that work with them, and then if you have found out the magic solution which demonstrates that your network is accessible, because this is a big problem, you get paid, then nobody is stealing electricity over transmission network, and then you try to duplicate. And I don't know why, but there I met some traders that offered to somehow share in the South African pool electricity supply will be, and this is unfortunate for the population, because they won't be the one enjoying what you are describing here. But you start unfortunately with the big players, big off-takers, maybe even foreign countries. You build your capacity. When the capacity is built, then you try to deploy it for the population. Because there can't be like an instant solution in the case of South Africa. It's very challenging. Oops.
Maybe one question about the fact that this is only for debt, of course, not used for, only for debt, because we are talking about debt. And what is the tenor used for the calculation of this?
Mustafa is already. No, so next.
Sorry to spoil you. Your presentation.
Spoiler alert. No. Then the next presentation will give us amount of equity you will recommend on tenor.
Okay.
And then you will come with a final matrix where you have again all your structure being ready.
An abacus, I would say.